48 Laws of Power, Chapter 25. Recreate yourself. Do not accept the roles that society forced on you. Recreate yourself by forging a new identity, one that commands attention and never bores the audience. Be the master of your own image rather than letting others define it for you. Incorporate dramatic devices into your public gestures and actions. Your power will be enhanced and your character will seem larger than life. Julius Caesar made his first significant mark on Roman society in the 1665 BC, when he assumed the post of aedile, the official in charge of grain distribution and public games. He began his entrance into the public eye by organizing a series of carefully crafted and well-timed spectacles, wild beast hunts, extravagant gladiator shows, theatrical contests. On several occasions, he paid for these spectacles out of his own pocket. To the common man, Julius Caesar became inevitably associated with these much-loved events. As he slowly rose to attain the position of consul, his popularity among the masses served as the foundation of his power. He had created an image of himself as a great public showman. In 49 BC, Rome was on the brink of civil war, with rival leaders Caesar and Pompey. At the height of the tension, Caesar, an addict of the stage, attended a theatrical performance and afterward, lost in thought, he wandered in the darkness back to his camp at the Rubicon, the river that divides Italy from Gaul, where he had been campaigning. To march his army back into Italy across the Rubicon would mean the beginning of a war in Pompey. Before his staff, Caesar argued both sides, forming the option like an actor on stage, the precursor of Hamlet. Finally, to put his soliloquy to an end, he pointed to a seemingly innocent apparition. At the end of the river, a very tall soldier blasting a call on a trumpet, then going across a bridge over the Rubicon was pronounced. Let us accept this as a sign from the gods and follow where they beckon, and vengeance on our double-dealing enemies. The die is cast. All of this he spoke portentously and dramatically, gesturing toward the river and looking his generals in the eye. He knew that these generals were uncertain in their support, but his oratory overwhelmed them with a sense of the drama of the moment and of the need to seize the time. Or more prosaic speech would never have had the same effect. The generals rallied to his cause. Caesar and his army crossed the Rubicon, and by the following year had vanquished Pompey, making Caesar dictator of Rome. In warfare, Caesar always played the leading man with gusto. He was as skilled as a horseman as any of his soldiers and took pride in outdoing them in feats of bravery and endurance. He entered battle astride the strongest mount, so that his soldiers would see him in the thick of battle, urging them on, always positioning himself in the center, a godlike symbol of power and a model for them to follow. Of all the armies in Rome, Caesar's was the most devoted and loyal. His soldiers, like the common people who had attended his entertainments, had come to identify with him and with his cause. After the defeat of Pompey, the entertainments grew in scale. Nothing like them had ever been seen in Rome. The chariot races became more spectacular, the gladiator fights more dramatic, and Caesar staged fights to the death among the Roman nobility. He organized enormous mock naval battles on an artificial lake. Plays were performed in every Roman ward. A giant new theater was built that sloped dramatically down the Tarpeian rock, Crowds from all over the empire flocked to these events. The roads to the Rome lined with visitors' tents. And in 45 BC, timing has its entry into the city for maximum effect and surprise. Caesar brought Cleopatra back to Rome after his Egyptian campaign and staged even more extravagant public spectacles. These events were more than devices to divert the masses. They dramatically enhanced the public sense of Caesar's character and made him seem larger than life. Caesar was the master of his public image, of which he was forever aware. When he appeared before crowds, he wore the most spectacular purple robes. He would be upstaged by no one. He was notoriously vain, and his appearance. It was that of one reason he enjoyed being honored by the Senate and people was on these occasions he would wear a laurel wreath hiding his baldness. Caesar was a master orator. He knew how to say a lot by saying a little. Intuited the moment to end a speech for maximum effect. However, never failed to incorporate a surprise into his public appearance, a startling announcement that would heighten their drama. Immensely popular among the Roman people, Caesar was hated and feared by his rivals. On the Isles of the March 15, in the year 45 BC, a group of conspirators led by Brutus and Cassius surrounded him in the Senate and stabbed him to death. Even dying, however, he kept his sense of drama. Drawing the top of his gown over his face, he let go of the cloth's lower part so that it draped his legs, allowing him to die covered and decent. According to Roman historian Suetonius, his final words to his old friend Brutus, who was about to deliver a second blow, were in Greek as it was rehearsed. For the end of a play, you too, my child. The Roman theater was an event for the masses, attended by crowds unimaginable today. Packed into enormous auditoriums, the audience would be amused by raucous comedy and moved by high tragedy. Theater seemed to contain the essence of life. In it, concentrated dramatic form. Like a religious ritual, it had powerful instant appeal to the common man. Julius Caesar was perhaps the first public figure to understand vital link between power and theater. This was because of his obsessive interest in drama. He sublimated this interest by making himself an actor and directed on the world stage. He said his lines as if they had been scripted. He gestured and moved through a crowd with a constant sense of how he appeared to his audience. He incorporated surprise and in his repertoire, building drama into his speeches, staging into his public appearances. His gestures were broad enough for the common man to grasp them instantly. He became immensely popular. Caesar set the ideal for all leaders and people of power. Like him, you must learn to enlarge your actions through dramatic techniques such as surprise, suspense, the creation of sympathy and symbolic identification. Also, like him, you must constantly aware of your audience, of what will please them and what will bore them. You must arrange to place yourself at the center, to command attention and never to be upstaged at any cost. In the year of 1831, a young woman named Aura Dupin Davant left her husband and family in the province and moved to Paris. She wanted to be a writer, marriage, she felt, was worse than prison, for it left her neither the time nor freedom to pursue her passion. In Paris, she would establish her independence and make her living by writing. Soon after Dannevant arrived in the capital, however, she had to confront certain harsh realities. To have any degree of freedom in Paris, you had to have money. For a woman, money could only come through marriage or prostitution. No woman had ever come close to making a living by writing. Women wrote as a hobby, supported by their husbands or by an inheritance. In fact, when Devon first showed her writing to an editor, he told her, "You should make babies, madam, not literature." Clearly, Devon had come to Paris to attempt the impossible. In the end, though, she came up with a strategy to do but no woman had ever done, a strategy to recreate herself completely, forging a public image of her own making. Women writers before her had been forced into a ready-made role, that of second-rate artists who wrote mostly for their other women. Duvin decided that if she had to play a role, she would turn the game around. She would play that part of a man. In 1832, a publisher accepted Duvin's first major novel, Indiana. She had chosen to publish it under a pseudonym, George Sand, and all of Paris assumed this impressive name writer was male. Devant had sometimes worn men's clothes before creating George Sand. She had always found men's shirts and riding breeches more comfortable. Now, as a public figure, she exaggerated the image. She had added a long men's coat, gray hats, heavy boots, and dandy cravats to her wardrobe. She smoked cigars and in conversation expressed herself like a man, unafraid to dominate the conversation or to use a saucy word. This strange male/female writer fascinated the public, and unlike other women writers, Sand found herself accepted in the clique of male artists. She drank and smoked with them, even carried on affairs with the most famous artists of Europe, Musset, Liszt, and Chopin. It was she who did the wooing and also the abandoning. She moved on at her discretion. Those who knew Sand well understood that her male persona protected her from public prying eyes. Out in the world, she enjoyed playing the part to the extreme. In private, she remained herself. She always realized that the character of George Sand could grow stale or predictable. And to avoid this, she would every now and then dramatically alter the character she had created. Instead of conducting affairs with famous men, she would begin meddling in politics, leading dramatic, inspiring student rebellions. No one would dictate to her the limits of character she had created. Long after she died, and after most people had stopped reading her novels, the larger-than-life theoretically of that character has continued to fascinate and inspire. Throughout Sand's public life, acquaintances and other artists who spent time in her company had the feeling that they were in the presence of a man. But in her journals and to her closest friends, such as George Flaubert, she confessed that she had no desire to be a man, but was playing a part for her own character. She refused the limits her society would have set on her. She did not attain her power, however, by being herself. Instead, she created a persona that could constantly adapt to her own desires, a persona that attracted attention and gave her presence. Understand this: the world wants to assign you a role in life, and once you accept that role, you are doomed. Your power is limited to tiny amount allotted to the role you have selected or have been forced to assume. An actor, on the other hand, plays many roles. Enjoy that protein powder of it as if it is beyond you. At least forge a new identity, one of your own making. one that has no boundaries assigned to it by envious and resentful world. This act of defiance is prothean. It makes you responsible for your own creation. Your new identity will protect you from the world precisely because it is not you. It is the costume you put on and take off. You need to take it personally. You need not take it personally. And your new identity sets you apart, gives you theatrical presence. Those in the back rows can see you and hear you, and those in the front row marvel at your audacity. Do not people talk in society of a man being a great actor. They do not mean by that he feels, but that he excels in simulating, though he feels nothing. The character you seem to have been born with is not necessarily who you are. Beyond the characteristics you have inherited, your parents, your friends, your peers have helped to shape your personality. The Promethean task of powerful is to take control of the process, to stop allowing others that ability to limit and mold them. Remake yourself into a character of power, working on yourself like clay. Be one of your greatest and most pleasurable life tasks. It makes you, in the essence of an artist, and art creating yourself. In fact, the idea of self-creation comes from the world of art. 4. Thousands of years, only kings and high quarters had the freedom to shape their public image and determine their own identity. Similarly, only kings have the wealth. Lords could contemplate their own image in art and consciously alter it. The rest of mankind played the limited role that society demanded of them and had little self-consciousness. A shift in this condition can be detected in Vasquez's painting, Las Minas, made in 1656. The artist appears at the left of the canvas and standing before a painting, there he is, the process of creating. But that has his back to us. We cannot see it. Beside him standing a princess, her attendants, and one of the court dwarfs, all watching him work. The people posing for the painting are directly visible, but we can see them in a tiny reflection in a mirror on the wall. All the kings and queens of Spain, who must be sitting somewhere in the front foreground outside of the picture. The painting represents a dramatic change in the dynamic of power and the ability to determine one's own position in society. For Vasquez, the artist is far more prominent position than the king and queen. In a sense, he is more powerful than they are, since he is clearly the one controlling the image, their image. Vasquez no longer saw himself as a slavish, dependent artist. He had remade himself into a man of power, and indeed the first people other than aristocrats to play openly with their image in Western society were artists and writers, and later on dandies and bohemians. Today, the concept of self-creation has slowly filtered down to the rest of society and has become an ideal to aspire to. Like Vasquez, you must demand for yourself the power to determine your position in the painting and to create your own image. The first step in the process of self-creation is self-consciousness. Being aware of yourself as an actor and taking control of your appearance and emotions. As Diderot said, the bad actor is the one who is always sincere. People who wear their hearts on their sleeves out in society are tiresome and embarrassing. Their sincerity notwithstanding, it is hard to take them seriously. Those who cry in public may temporarily elicit sympathy, but sympathy soon turns to scorn and irritation at their self-obsessiveness. They are crying to get attention, we feel, and a malicious part of us wants to deny them the satisfaction. Good actors control themselves better. They can play sincere and heartfelt, can affect a tear and compassionate look at will, but they don't have to feel it. They externalize emotion in a form that others can understand. Method acting is fatal in the real world. No ruler or leader could possibly play that part if all the emotions he showed had to be real. So learn self control. Adopt the plasticity of the actor who can mold his or her face to the emotions required. The second step in the process of self creation is a variation on the George Sand strategy, the creation of a memorable character, one that compels attention, that stands out above and others plays on the stage. This was the game Abraham Lincoln played. The homespun common countryman he knew was a kind of president that America had never had but would delight in electing. Although many of these qualities came naturally to him, he played them up. The hat, the clothes, the beard. No president before him had worn a beard. Lincoln was also the first president to use photographs to spread his image, helping to create the icon of homespun president. Good drama, however, needs more than an interesting appearance or a single standout moment. Drama takes place over time. It is unfolding, rhythm, and timing, and critical. One of the most important elements in the rhythm of drama is suspense. Houdini, for instance, could sometimes complete his escape acts in seconds, but he drew out the minutes to make the audience sweat. They knew to keep the audience on the edge of their seats and letting events unfold slowly, then speeding them up at the right moment according to a pattern and tempo that you control. Great rulers from Napoleon to Mao Zedong had used theatrical timing to surprise and divert their public. Franklin Delano Roosevelt understood the importance of staging political events in a particular order and rhythm. In the time of the 1932 president election, the United States was in the midst of a dire economic crisis. Banks were failing at the alarming rate. Shortly after winning the election, Roosevelt went into a kind of retreat. He said nothing about his plans or his cabinet's appointments. He even refused to meet the sitting president, Herbert Hoover, to discuss the transition. By the time Roosevelt's inauguration, the country was in a state of high anxiety. In his inaugural address, Roosevelt shifted gears, making a powerful speech, making it clear that he intended to lead the country into a completely new direction, sweeping away the timid gestures of his predecessors. From then on, the pace of his speeches and public decisions, cabinet appointments, bold legislation, unfolded at an incredibly rapid rate. The period after the inauguration became known as the 100 Days. Its success in altering the country's mood partly stemmed from Roosevelt's clever pacing and use of dramatic contrast. He held his audience in suspense, then hit them with a series of bold gestures and seemed all more momentous because they came from nowhere. You must learn to orchestrate events in a similar manner, never revealing all your cards at once, but unfolding them in a way that heightens their dramatic effect. Besides covering a multitude of sins, good drama can also confuse and devise your enemy. During World War II, the German playwright Bertolt Brecht worked in Hollywood as a screenwriter. After the war, he was called before the House of Committee on Un-American activities for his supposedly communist sympathies. Other writers who had been called to testify planned to humiliate the committee members with an angry, emotional stand. Brecht was wiser. He would play the committee like a violin, charming them while fooling them as well. He carefully rehearsed his responses and brought along some props, notably a cigar on which he puffed away, knowing the head of the committee liked cigars. And indeed, he proceeded to beguile the committee well-crafted responses that were ambitious and funny and double-edged. Instead of an angry, heartfelt tirade, he ran circles around them with a stage production, and they let him off scot-free. Other dramatic effects for your repertoire includes the bow gest, an act at a time climatic moment that symbolizes your triumph or your boldness. Caesar's dramatic crossing of the Rubicon was bow gest, a move that dazzled the soldiers and gave him heroic proportions. You must also appreciate the importance of stage entrances and exits. When Cleopatra first met Caesar in Egypt, she arrived rolled up in a carpet, which she arranged to have unfurled at his feet. George Washington twice left power with flourish and fanfare, first as a general, then as a president who refused to sit for a third term, showing he knew how to make the moment count, dramatically and symbolically. Your own entrances and exits should be crafted and planned as carefully. Remember that overacting can be counterproductive. It is another way of spending too much effort trying to attract attention. The actor Richard Burton discovered early in his career that by standing totally still on stage, he drew attention to himself and away from the other actors. It is less what you do that matters clearly than how you do it. Your gracefulness and imposing stillness on the social stage count for more than overdoing your part and moving around too much. Finally, learn to play many roles, to be whatever the moment requires. Adapt your mask to the situation. Be protein in faces you wear. Bismarck played this game to perfection. To a liberal, he was a liberal. To a hawk, he was a hawk. He could not be grasped. What cannot be grasped cannot be consumed. The Greek sea god Proteus, his power came from his ability to change shape at will, to be whatever the moment required. When Menelaus, brother of Agamemnon, tried to seize him, Proteus transformed himself into a lion, then a serpent, a panther, a boar, running water, and finally a leafy tree. Know how to be all things to all men, a discreet Proteus, scholar amongst scholars, a saint amongst saints. This is the art, winning over everyone. Like attracts like. That note of temptation and adapt yourself to that each person you meet. Follow the lead of the serious and jovial. In turn, change your mood discreetly. There can be no rehearsal to this critical law. Bad theater is bad theater. Even appearing natural requires art. In the other words, acting. Bad acting only creates embarrassment. Of course, you should not be too dramatic. Avoid the histrionic gesture. But this is simply bad theater anyway, since it violates centuries-old dramatic laws against overacting. In essence, there is no reversal to this law.